Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name is Bridget Maloney. I am the Managing Director of the University of Waterloo's Corporate Engagement Office, which is called GEDI, the Gateway for Enterprises to Discover Innovation at the University of Waterloo. So before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we at the University of Waterloo live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldeman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. So I'm very pleased you could join us for this month's 30 Minutes with the GEDI Exchange webinar. The GEDI Exchange supports the success of startups and scale-ups affiliated with the University of Waterloo, regardless of where the company is located globally. And the exchange actively promotes collaboration among its members, which are large corporations and smaller companies, scale-ups and startups, and the university. So for today, we're going to be focusing on the theme, Instrumenting and Sensing the Rugged and Hostile Environments of the World. So to talk about that, I'd like to welcome Hamid El-Mohammed from AOMS Technologies and Minelli Clements from LorCan Technologies. They'll introduce themselves in a moment before addressing that theme. Then at the end, we'll go through audience questions. The panelist portion of this webinar is 30 minutes in length, and it's followed by a 10-minute Q&A. So I'm hoping you, the audience, are able to stay with us for the Q&A session. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to send your questions via the WebEx Q&A. It's located in the bottom right corner of your window and click Q&A. Just select all panelists before sending. This event is being recorded and soon will be uploaded to GEDI's YouTube channel. So now I'd like to turn it over to our guests to introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Minelli, to introduce yourself and LorCan, and then Hamid, if you afterwards would like to introduce yourself and AOMS. Minelli.
Thanks, Bridget. Hi, everyone. My name is Minelli Clements, CEO of LorCan Technologies. And at LorCan, what we do is we aim to, quote unquote, connect the impossible. So what we have done is we've looked at remote area sensing devices that are used typically for environmental monitoring for industry and conservation. And we've created a connectivity solution that basically designs a mesh network that'll allow for real-time monitoring from the sensors located in remote regions.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Minelli. So Hamid.
Thank you, Bridget, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet everyone here. My name is Hamid. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AOMS Technologies. I'm also one of the UW grads. I did my PhD in 2010 in mechanical engineering program. At AOMS, our focus is on integrated Internet of Things to help industries collect mission-critical data from assets and processes, specifically in harsh environments and hard-to-access locations.
So perfect combination of two companies to talk about this really interesting topic. So why don't we start with the basics? So on some level, people know about Internet of Things and IoT, but what is distinctive about what you're doing in this space? And Minelli, perhaps I can start with you.
Yeah, so we all know IoT devices are used in a lot of our urban centers to get data. They basically are used over a wireless setting and transmit the data to where we can use it for whatever purposes we need. But we've all been in a situation where we're off grid or off net and we don't have connectivity, which leaves us blind to the world around us. So now imagine like large industries operating in these spaces without the access to their data. And so that's where we found a unique place is to figure out how can we allow and help these industries in very remote regions, such as mining, oil and gas, forestry, not basically create more visibility into their entire operations, not just the ones that are on net and on grid. So that's the area that we're focusing in is the remote region technology.
Great. That sounds like a challenge, but really important to address. So that's great. So Hamid, what about AOMS? What's really distinctive about what AOMS is doing?
So the AOMS, our focus is on integrated IoT platforms and specifically for harsh environments. Minali mentioned some examples of remote areas. Our focus is mostly on applications that require a different level of reliability. Industries such as oil and gas, construction, infrastructure, if you look at those type of environments, they are either in remote areas, in areas that there is no really controlled environment around devices and sensors and the entire hardware infrastructure. And those type of customers or company, they're looking for something that has multiple layers of reliability. They cannot really afford if a sensor loses its power or underperform because of the 1 meter of snow on top of the device, for example. Or in applications we have had that customers were really asking for sensors that can withstand very, very high temperatures. So these are unconventional, I would say, environments that are very typical in special industries, oil and gas, heavy manufacturing, construction, infrastructure. And that's where we bring value by providing our customers with an end-to-end solution, which includes the hardware, connectivity, and the software solutions around that, which is basically an integrated solution. But at the same time, a platform that has a secondary layer of reliability to meet the project requirements or the inspection requirements. Because most of our work are related to remote inspection, and that's where we bring value to our clients and to our customers.
Excellent. So, I mean, what inspired you to focus on this kind of specialized solution or specialized focus on the IoT universe, and maybe, you know, what difference do you see it's making?
Very, very good question. So when we started the company, the IoT was not very popular as it is today. Our company was started really as a sensor company. We actually started the company to commercialize a technology that we had developed at the University of Waterloo, focused on a sensor technology based on fiber optic sensors. And fiber optic sensors is a type of sensor technology that is very robust to harsh environments. And that's how everything started. We built solutions around that sensor technology to meet the industrial needs. And that's how everything was kicked in and coined in our company. And that's basically the genesis of our company is the harsh environments. Over the past 7 years, we have commercialized different type of technologies, and we actually strengthen our position in the space and in the applications where we're categorized as rugged environments. And that's how we evolved from a starting point up to where we are today.
That's great. You've captured a niche. That's fantastic. And Minali, so, you know, it's quite specialized as well, what LorCan is focusing on with this application in the IoT universe. So what inspired you to choose this, and what difference are you seeing already that it's making?
Yeah, so I come from a telecommunications background. I worked for one of the larger telecoms for several years. And what I saw was that remote area spaces always created a problem when it came to providing connectivity solutions there. And these areas are kind of where the biggest climate impact is happening by the industries operating in those spaces. So I wanted to be able to provide industries and also conservation agencies that are monitoring these spaces with the tools that will work in those environments, not tools brought in from urban centers with, you know, a wooden box around them, hoping that for the best against the elements, right? So that's where my inspiration came from, was to mitigate the effects of climate change by providing those with the greatest impact or the ability to impact it with proper tools and resources.
Great. So it's really the areas you're focused on are very remote and harsh locations. So how do you eventually get the data back to where someone can use it? Maybe you could provide a couple of success stories if you have them.
So we've been working with Yukon Fish and Wildlife to understand their use cases out up in the north. And a lot of it comes with their feasibility of some of the projects. So for example, there's a camera project that they have that has 125 wildlife cameras that are 2 to 5 kilometers apart, spaced apart. And that's very difficult to go out there and manually obtain the data frequently. So projects like that are very dependent on completion so that the impacts assessments can be done so that highways can be built and access can be given to communities in those spaces. Those kind of go to the wayside, which then puts at risk a lot of migration routes, a lot of biodiversity. So that's one of the use cases that we've been looking at is how do we get them a feasible solution that is also affordable, cost effective, and will work consistently to get them the information that they need in order to provide them with enough data for a proper impact assessment. Another use case is out in Vancouver Island, a very small remote community that is dependent on clean water in order to keep citizens within that community. And although sensors exist to monitor the water, same problem. The sensors are off just the smallest range of cell phone tower, right? So they have a couple of towers placed in between, but the sensors are off that range. So again, it's getting that information from the sensor to the closest point of connectivity so that people can monitor their water quality and ensure sustainable processes in the future.
Great. Thanks, Manelli. And then Hamid, so same question for you with these very kind of harsh locations is more the case, or remote in your case. How does AOMS get the data back to where someone can use it? And could you provide an example or maybe a success story in that area?
Yes, as you mentioned, connectivity is a major part of the entire IoT stack, and that's mostly wireless connectivity. And we have actually two types of applications for connectivity. In cases that we are working actually with customers who have an existing IT infrastructure, we actually use their network. This is mostly facilities that are already have some kind of a connectivity solution. In a lot of cases, actually, we deal with environments that are remote and really cannot rely on existing IT infrastructure. In those cases, we actually build partnerships with telecommunication companies like Rogers, Bell in Canada, and we use their network to connect our devices to the internet. However, we have had cases that we were in areas that the coverage, there was no cellular coverage. And as an example was a major dam rehabilitation project in Northern Ontario for a major hydroelectric power producer in the province. And we were in an area that we had sensors because no one can really go and do manual measurement. You really need a wireless device and a sensor to collect data. But at the same time, there was no cellular coverage. However, there was an internet access to a location which was a few kilometers away from the site. So we actually had to put our thoughts together, and our RF engineers, they started looking into what sort of communications or local communications, wireless communications they can put together. We actually put some antennas there, and we designed the communication system that can transmit the data to the access point, which was about a few kilometers from that site. That was just one example. We had another example that we were contracted a project in California. It was a major US government funded project, one of the US Superfund contracts for cleanup of contaminated lands. We were the contractor for the monitoring and data collection. So fortunately in that application, we had an existing IT infrastructure. So we piggybacked on that IT infrastructure. But at the same time, we had to do a lot of optimization to make sure that we do not overload the network because there are a lot of other equipment and systems are connected to the same network. So we do a lot of work on that side as well. Another example is a major infrastructure project in the US and down in Florida. We have a contract with a company that is building and constructing actually a high-speed train line from Orlando all the way down to the coast. And that's, again, one of those cases that connectivity is an issue, and we actually partner up with a telco company. We connected all our devices to their system to make sure that we have a seamless integration from data collection all the way to the software.
Interesting use cases. So where do you see this field evolving? How do you see this field that you're in evolving?
You mean the IoT in general, or specifically IoT for?
In your field specifically. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if you map out all the industries in the value chain or the technology adoption care for the IoT, we have a good number of industries that are very well down into the adoption curve. This includes advanced manufacturing companies, automotive, aerospace. But we have a large group of industries that are early in the full adoption of the technology. And those industries are mostly the traditional industries that they have legacy systems, they have old IT infrastructure, and they're still figuring out what would be the best way to adopt IoT. And they all talk about how we can do digital transformation. Digital transformation is basically the terminology that is being used quite significantly. And I think the COVID-19 in general had a very big impact on that adoption curve. A lot of industries that were considered traditional, or sometimes we call them old school industries, they have accelerated their adoption rate. We see a lot of activities in the industries that they have initiatives for basically adopting digital transformation and fast track that, because accessing data and remote inspection is a big thing for them. It's not just a nice to have, especially in cases that, for example, now we are in a stay-at-home order. A lot of projects we hear that are shut down because you cannot do anything. And the concern is that they have a lot of people on those sites and they are not allowed to operate. But reality is that probably 50% of those people can stay in the office and remotely control the site or the project. So that's only doable by having a reliable platform to collect data and take actions based on the data. So we see a very interesting transition happening, and COVID-19 contributed a lot to that. But at the same time, the whole industry has been evolving for a long time. But we see that the whole pandemic situation has accelerated that.
It's very, very interesting about the COVID, what you're observing during the last year with COVID, the accelerated adoption. So one more question for you, Hamid, and then Manali, I'll come back to you and ask similar questions. Well, so then Hamid, what are your own sort of aspirations with the company? And you know, are there even some new areas that you might see AOMS pursuing in future?
So specifically talking about AOMS, we started our company as a sensor company 7 years ago, and then we built an IoT platform and an IoT stack around our product. I think for a company like us, we consider ourselves as an IoT solution provider. We actually specifically target applications that require solutions, specific solutions, either in construction, infrastructure, manufacturing. And we will be heavily investing in data analytics and generating insights from the data. That's basically closes the entire solution, helps us to provide a turnkey platform for our customers. That's going to be the evolution of our product down the road. And we are making transition to become industry agnostic and sector agnostic and application agnostic, focusing on different industries which are dealing with remote locations or harsh environments. We're not going to change that, but we're going to expand our offering to multiple industries who are dealing with the same problem.
Fantastic roadmap you've got planned there. That's excellent, Hamid. So Manali, I'll come back to you and ask some similar questions. You know, the field is fairly your LorCan is fairly new to the field, but if you have comments about how you see the field evolving or aspirations for LorCan, or even down the road, new areas you might want to have LorCan be entering into, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So LorCan is in the field of, I like to think, green or clean tech. That's something that's quite a trendy word to say, but it's also very difficult to apply in a sense that we're dealing with very traditional practices from very traditional businesses. So we don't want to come in and just completely disrupt their processes, because that would be detrimental to everyone involved. And as Hamid had mentioned, a digital transformation is something that these industries are looking at, but you can't really digital transform until you actually have enough information about your current operations to move it into or shift it into another level. So we want to basically help these companies and these industries grow and develop over time as they start reframing their current practices. And that's what I'm noticing a lot when I'm having conversations with oil and gas, mining, and industries in those areas, is they're having more of a CSR approach to things. They're looking at things like social licenses in spaces that communities are demanding. Before you go and run a pipeline through their community, it's, hey, can you ensure that this is going to be properly monitored? And that's important for all businesses to keep in mind. And that's a trend that I'm very much aligned to supporting, is the responsible practices of businesses in the future. So when we're looking at how we develop our roadmap and how we're aligning ourselves with the right partners, the right vendors, we're looking at very innovative, clean solutions that are coming through from around the world, from Europe. That's one of our greatest influences, working with the governments of France and French industry that are held to standards of climate controls and green technology. And it's really interesting even to see the type of ways that our traditional chipsets and our traditional antennas, those are evolving over time to kind of keep that in scope as well, right? So for us specifically, we're going to continue to develop our devices for remote areas in mind, with the constraints against the environment, the ruggedization of the equipment, ensuring we can operate in sub-below temperatures, or conversely the other way where it's extreme humidity and heat. Those are all the challenges of these remote spaces that we keep within the development of our solutions. And it's really listening to industries, it's listening to more so communities and those people in those spaces to say, okay, what's the topology like? What can you tell us about, like, the weather? What can you tell us about, where these devices are placed, all of that, and understanding our customers, understanding their needs, and then developing the solutions that will help them meet those needs.
Potential for a lot of use cases and a lot of adoption. So that's fantastic as you move forward. Kudos to you. So just as we wrap up, just to the last question before we head into the Q&A, I wanted to ask, maybe I'll start with you, Manali. So, how or why and how does continuing to partner with the University of Waterloo make a difference for your company?
Yeah, so anyone who knows me knows that I love a challenge, a good challenge. And being a University of Waterloo grad, we've always been challenged through our programs to think outside the box. And that's what I'm finding so useful with my company is I can dream up 1,001 ideas. And if my CTO lets me pursue one of them, the first place I go to is the university to find somebody who's probably in that realm and dealing with that same thing. Or, I mean, I've dealt with Tom from the GEDIx quite a bit, and I'll say one word, and he'll be like, talk to this person, this person, this person. So the university is such a center for innovation. It has such creative and extremely intelligent individuals coming out of it, and we're very fortunate to work in this environment, in this community, and leverage those resources when we need it. And it's so agile that's what's needed right now when you're innovating.
Great to hear. Thanks, Manelli. And Hamid, over to you.
Yeah, as Manelli mentioned, I mean, our roots goes back to Waterloo, to the university, and that's where we graduated, and then we were challenged with research, with projects. And so there are two ways that we actually work very actively with the university at the moment. One part of it, accessing their talent. I would say most of our co-op students every term are from Waterloo. I have a very good relationship with the Career Center at Waterloo, and each term we have this term we have actually 4. Last term we have 5 students from Waterloo, and we're very familiar with the system there. I mean, my other co-founders are also from Waterloo. One of them was actually in the co-op program. So that's one of the ways that we're working very closely with Waterloo. We actually have sponsored a few projects through different programs, through different government funding programs at Waterloo, mostly on the applied research projects. So these are basically 2 areas that we work actively with Waterloo, and we're always keeping our connections with the university, with the state-of-the-art research that is being done, because the genesis of any innovation is the research part of it, and that usually happens either at the research center or a university or an academic environment. So we highly believe in that, and we always try to work with universities, specifically Waterloo, in order to access both the talent and the research.
That's so great to hear, and I hope as you continue on your trajectory of huge success that you always come back to the university for your, research collaborations and talent and even other things perhaps. Thanks, Hamid. And Manelli, what about, you commented really well on that topic, and if I'm correct, you're an MBET grad, which is the Masters of Business, Entrepreneurship and Technology in the Conrad School. Just a little plug there for that program. So with that, we'll wrap up now. Thank you so much. That was a really interesting conversation. We're nearly out of time before the Q&A, but I want to thank you so much, Hamid and Manelli, for your thoughts and your insights into what's happening in your own company, what's happening in the field. And hopefully the audience learned as much as I did about this topic of instrumenting and sensing in these rugged and hostile environments in the world. You're both working through, with multiple countries, so that's fantastic. And congratulations to both of you on all your successes so far, and I know more to come for sure. So we're now at the half-hour mark, so I hope the audience, you can stay for the next 10-minute Q&A. And that will start now. And anyone who needs to drop off, thank you very much for joining. There will be a YouTube loaded onto GEDI's YouTube channel. But if you'd like to exchange any thoughts with AOMS Technologies or LorCan Technologies, please let me know. You can contact me. My email is on the homepage of GEDI, where you registered for this event. And your information won't be shared outside the university. We'll be sure to make introductions only at your request. So our next webinar is on June 15th, and it's with Jason DeLint, CEO of Blue Lion Labs, and Roy Brower, Professor and Executive Director of the Water Institute at the University of Waterloo, for a discussion related to aquaculture. So that will be quite interesting. Looking forward to that. You'll receive a link to register for that webinar after today's session ends. And for those able to stay on a few more minutes, we'll now start the optional Q&A. So I'm happy to start the Q&A and want to thank the audience who, some folks submitted questions during the registration, and I've been provided with a selection of those questions to ask Manali and Hamid, and you're both welcome to contribute to the discussion. I'll try and direct the question to one of you to start, and I guess, you know, it's only 10 minutes, so we'll try and keep the answers somewhat short to allow for as many questions as we can. So let me check here on my phone and we'll look at the first question. So for the first question, I'm actually combining two queries that came in from the audience through the webinar registration. So first is, who or what influenced you the most to pursue your entrepreneurial passion? And related to that is, once you began on that journey, what were, or maybe still are, key barriers to growing your company? So Manali, maybe I'll ask you first.
Fun question. So what influenced me is my passion, I suppose, for being outdoors all the time. I felt a need to start giving back to the spaces I enjoy so much. And that is the fluffy answer for what influenced me. The more practical answer is that I knew that I can make a change where I can make a change. And I suppose that's where you have to start, is with your own strengths, and don't try to create something or learn something right away. Like, start with your experiences, and my experiences in telecom and with working with industries in that space gave me the knowledge and insight to start developing something for these cases. And the barriers I face, I suppose it's always learning. You have to constantly keep, you have to constantly keep learning. Like, you learn from others, you learn from the new partners you develop. Everything's like a learning experience. You are going to be relatively unknown as you start. And I think the biggest thing that I learned is, don't be afraid to pursue things. Like, don't let fear run your next move. And anything that happens, if it's good or bad or whatever, it's always a learning opportunity.
Thanks, Manali. Hamid, what was your influence to start this whole entrepreneurial venture, which has become very solid company venture? And then as you are on this journey, or, you know, what barriers, what was a key barrier maybe that you experienced that you overcame with the company? It will help others on the other aspiring entrepreneurs.
One of my considerations in pursuing this journey was following the passion. It's always very important to follow what you like and what your passion is. And for me, it was quite a rough path at the beginning to figure out what I want to do. But I remember I was watching Steve Jobs, the speeches and comments in one of the, I think it was Stanford or MIT, I remember that. I mean, he has a very good point. I don't exactly remember the exact wording that he used, but his point was, just follow your passion. Like, that's the most important, because then you can just do whatever you want. I think that was the key for me, was to make a difference and in the world. I mean, that's important. And getting into this entrepreneur journey is sometimes I would say that the right time, right place, right technology applies to that. Unfortunately, but at the end of the day, it's a journey. I would say luck is important. I don't. You may see companies that grow so fast and they become Google, Apple, Microsoft, but some other companies, they become successful, though they don't become Apple. It's a journey. We should all accept that it's a journey. It needs a lot of perseverance, hard working, but at the same time, you should enjoy it. Otherwise, I mean, the entrepreneurs will get burned out and they become tired of what they're doing. So it's understanding that it's a journey and it's a step-by-step process, and it always, every day of your life requires decision making, and sometimes very critical decision making that will make or break it. That's the important part of it. And we live in a world that it's very competitive, and having innovative ideas is difficult, and then commercializing those ideas is even more difficult. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, and for me, which was not the exception, is that learning the business aspect of it is important. We all came from, I think Minelli came from a business program, but I never came out of a business program. So it was a little bit of a learning for me and my other co-founders to figure out, this is the innovation, this is the business, how you marry them together.
Right.
We build a company out of it. Sometimes the best innovations in the world, they don't even get commercialized. It's a combination of everything. So that's important to understand for any entrepreneurial path. That there might be a lot of learning involved in the whole journey.
Thank you for that sharing your experience and wisdom for others. So another question, I'll direct this to actually to start with you, Hamid. So there's a lot of news these days about 5G and its promise to enable IoT. So can you comment on 5G and especially its role in IoT solutions in this case, like for rugged, hostile, remote environments?
That's a good point. 5G, there are a lot of promise behind 5G, and there are different aspects of the 5G that can transform the world and the IoT. One application of the 5G that we are actually investing in, and we have done some research work on that and collaboration, is the speed, the communication speed or transferring of data at a high speed and also with low latency. As an example, we had a project that required to collect large amounts of data, to send it to a cloud server and do a massive modeling at the cloud level. So because the whole process is very quick, the decision making and then the modeling has to be done at a very high speed. So we really needed a 5G connectivity in order to make it happen. And that's basically the area that we believe that the 5G will transform. I know there are a lot of other areas that a lot of other businesses are investing, but for us, the speed of data collection and the throughput and the reducing the delay.
Great.
That's the important part for us.
Great that it sounds like you have a use case already you're exploring.
We have a use case for that.
Yeah.
I actually collaborated with Ericsson and on OCE and the Encore program.
Yes, yeah. Fantastic.
That.
Yes. Minelli, does 5G play in your case, into the scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. So similar, it's the Encore program that we're also part of, allows us to play around with the new 5G modems and tech that's coming out. And it basically extends the range of our access to the closest point of connectivity. There's a lot of limitations with 5G as well that we need to keep in mind. But at the end of the day, it's how far can we extend out to connect these devices, and that's it's promising in that space.
Great. Well, it's a shame we had more questions than there is time to ask. So unfortunately, we're out of time, but that was a fantastic discussion, and really want to thank you both for joining today and sharing all your insights. I want to thank the audience as well for joining us for the main session and also for the Q&A. And the insights and experience you shared are not only great for you as a company to spread that news about your company out into the world, but I think it also could draw the attention of partners or customers, and just your insights and experiences launching a company. Those on the phone on the webinar might find it really beneficial. So as I said, if anyone wants to share thoughts with AOMS Technologies or LorCan Technologies, just please let me know and I'll put you in touch. My email is on the GEDI homepage. And if you have any questions, the audience of further questions about something you heard today, again, happy to, whether it's about GEDI, the GEDI Exchange, the University of Waterloo, or AOMS or LorCan, just please feel free to be in touch. And want to share in our upcoming June webinar. So it's on June 15th. And like this webinar, you can register at uwaterloo.ca/Jedi/events. You'll see that on the screen, and you'll receive the link to the June webinar after this session ends. It'll also be shared on GEDI's LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you're not already signed up for GEDI's social feeds, please do. The June 15th webinar, again, just as a reminder, it's with Jason DeLint, CEO of Blue Lion Labs, and Roy Brower, who's professor and executive director of the Water Institute at the University of Waterloo, for a discussion around aquaculture. So really look forward to seeing you then. This ends our session for today, and want to thank everyone for joining us. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.